My name is Elena. I'm 31 years old, and for 2.5 years I thought I was building a life with someone who saw me as a partner. Turns out I was just sharing space with a man who believed the entire world revolved around his convenience. He said, "We're not married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." And everyone laughed. I just stood there in my own kitchen, wooden spoon in hand, the smell of my mother's marinara sauce still filling the air, and I smiled. A calm, quiet smile. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply let the words settle deep inside my chest, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know needed closing. But 3 days later, when Marcus came home from his boys' trip, suntanned and smelling like lake water and cheap beer, his key didn't turn in the lock anymore. And our 78-year-old neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn, looked him straight in the eyes and told him exactly why. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, if you've ever paid every bill, cooked every meal, and still been treated like a temporary guest, then stay with me. This story isn't loud. It's not dramatic screaming matches or broken dishes. It's the quiet kind of strength that comes when a woman finally decides to listen to what someone has been showing her all along. Let me take you back a little. This house, my house, sits on a quiet street lined with old oak trees. It's not huge, but it's mine. The down payment came from the inheritance my mother left when she passed away 7 years ago. Every brick, every window, every inch of garden in the back carries her memories. She used to tell me, "Elena, own your space. Don't ever shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable." I took those words seriously the day I signed the papers with only my name on them. For the first year and a half with Marcus, things felt nice. He was charming, attentive when it suited him, and he had this way of making me laugh even after long editing days in my sunroom studio. But slowly, without any real conversation, he started moving in. A toothbrush became two. A drawer became half the closet. One weekend he brought over his gaming PC just for a few days, and it never left. Before I fully realized what was happening, he had been living with me for 8 months, and I was still the only name on every single bill. I told myself it was okay. We were building something. We were a team. But teams don't usually have one person carrying all the weight while the other treats the home like a free resort. Marcus had 3 best friends, Tyler, Jamal, and Chris. They called themselves the Crew. To me, they became a constant reminder that my sanctuary was no longer just mine. They showed up whenever they wanted, left messes I was expected to clean, and treated my living room like their personal sports bar. The noise, the clutter, the complete lack of respect for my need for peace after long workdays. It all started chipping away at me. I tried to talk about it multiple times. I was always calm, always reasonable. But every conversation ended with Marcus brushing it off with that signature laugh and saying things like, "Babe, you're overthinking. They're just guys being guys." The night everything shifted, I was doing what I always did to find my center. Cooking my mother's recipe in the kitchen. The garlic and herbs were dancing in the pan. When Marcus walked in, already dressed to go out, phone pressed to his ear. "Yeah, 3 nights at the cabin sounds perfect," he was saying loudly. "Nah, she's not coming. Why would she?" He hung up, flashed me that bright, careless grin, and announced, "The boys and I are heading up north tomorrow. Gonna be a good one." I kept stirring. "Which cabin are you guys going to?" It was such a simple, normal question. The kind any partner of over 2 years would ask, but the way Marcus looked at me, like I had crossed some invisible line, told me everything I needed to know. Right then, Tyler walked straight into my kitchen without knocking. Marcus turned to him, grinning like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Bro, can you believe this? She wants to know where I'm going." Tyler smirked and looked me up and down. Damn, she really thinks she runs things around here. Marcus stepped closer, hands on his hips, voice dripping with condescension. Elena, stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with. The laughter that followed from all three of them echoed in my kitchen like a final cruel punchline. In that moment, something inside me went very still. The version of me that had been trying so hard to make this work, the version that made excuses and cleaned up after everyone, simply stepped back. She didn't rage. She didn't beg. She just accepted the truth he had been showing me for months. I looked at Marcus, smiled softly and said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. My mistake." They laughed even harder, thinking they had won. Marcus even patted my cheek like I was a child who finally understood her place. But that was the night I decided I was done shrinking. If this story is already hitting home for you, type the word peace in the comments. You're not alone in this. Because what happened over the next few days was the beginning of me, quietly, calmly, and completely taking my life back. That night, after they left for their pre-trip drinks, I sat alone at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, the sauce still simmering gently on the stove. The laughter from earlier kept echoing in my mind, not with anger, but with a strange kind of clarity. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to rationalize Marcus's behavior. I was simply seeing it for what it was. This house was never meant to be a battleground. It was my sanctuary, my fresh start after losing my mother. The two-bedroom cottage with the wide front porch and the sunroom I converted into a photography studio had been my proudest achievement. I still remember the day I got the keys. Standing in the empty living room with tears in my eyes, promising myself I would fill it with peace, creativity, and love. My mother's inheritance made it possible, and every mortgage payment I made alone was a quiet tribute to her belief in me. Marcus didn't move in with a big conversation or a mutual decision. It happened gradually, like water slowly flooding a room. At first it was sweet. He'd stay over more often because your place feels like home. Then a drawer was cleared for his clothes. Then his favorite coffee mug appeared in the cabinet. One weekend he brought his gaming setup because the internet is faster here, and suddenly the corner of my living room became his personal arena. I didn't mind at the beginning. I liked having someone to come home to after long client shoots. I enjoyed cooking for two and waking up to his arm around me. But slowly the balance shifted. I was still the one paying for groceries, utilities, internet, and the mortgage. Marcus contributed occasionally, usually when I gently reminded him, but it always felt like a favor rather than a shared responsibility. And then came the crew. Tyler was the loudest, always the one with the big opinions. Jamal was more laid back, but followed whatever Tyler said. Chris was the quiet one who just smirked and went along. They started showing up unannounced on weekends, treating my home like a frat house. Pizza boxes stacked on my carefully chosen coffee table, muddy footprints across the floors I had just cleaned, empty beer cans left on the porch. The noise from their gaming sessions and sports games would bleed upstairs even when I had deadlines. I tried setting boundaries early on. One Sunday afternoon, after they had left another massive mess, I sat Marcus down in the living room that still smelled like lemon cleaner. "Babe, I love that you have close friends, but this is my home too. I need it to feel peaceful, especially when I'm working. Can we agree they don't just show up without asking?" He leaned back on the couch, giving me that half smile that used to melt me. "Elena, you're always so tense about the house. It's just guys hanging out. You make it sound like they live here." But they practically did, and every time I brought it up, the conversation went in circles until I was the one apologizing for being uptight. Looking back now, I can see how I slowly started shrinking. I worked longer hours in my studio with the door closed. I started wearing noise-canceling headphones even when I wasn't editing. I stopped inviting my own friends over because I was embarrassed by the constant chaos. My once calm, beautiful space started feeling like a place I was merely tolerated in. There were small moments that hurt more than they should have. Like the time I came home from a big client meeting excited to share the good news, only to find the living room filled with the crew watching a game, my new throw pillows shoved onto the floor. Or the evenings I cooked nice dinners only for Marcus to eat quickly and then disappear with his friends, leaving me to clean up alone. I kept telling myself that relationships required compromise, that love meant being understanding. But deep down, a quiet voice was growing louder, the same voice that sounded a lot like my mother's. It reminded me that compromise shouldn't feel like erasure. By the time that fateful Thursday night arrived, I had already been carrying a heavy, invisible weight for months. The house that was supposed to be my legacy was starting to feel like a prison I was paying for. And Marcus, the man I thought I loved, had made it very clear how he saw our arrangement. He wasn't cruel in the obvious ways. He wasn't screaming or breaking things. He was simply indifferent to my needs while fully enjoying the benefits of my stability. He had created a life where he was free to come and go as he pleased, surrounded by his friends, while I quietly maintained the foundation that made it all possible. That night, as I finally turned off the stove and stared at the sauce I no longer had an appetite for, I made myself a promise. I wasn't going to argue or fight or beg for respect anymore. I was simply going to start believing what he had been telling me all along. If you've ever stayed in a situation longer than you should have because you were hoping they would change, I see you. I was you. And tomorrow morning, when Marcus and the boys drove off for their cabin trip, I would begin the quiet work of taking my life back. One deliberate, peaceful step at a time. The weeks leading up to that Thursday night had become a predictable pattern I had somehow learned to endure. Marcus would leave for work in the morning, and by evening, the house would transform into something that no longer felt like mine. I'd come downstairs after editing photos for hours to find the living room rearranged. My carefully placed art books pushed aside for controllers and snack wrappers. The crew had their rituals. Friday nights meant wings and loud arguments about sports. Saturday afternoons were for just chilling that somehow stretched into Sunday evenings. They never offered to help clean up. They never asked if I minded. And Marcus never seemed to notice how much it was costing me emotionally. One particular Sunday stands out in my memory. I had spent the entire morning doing a deep clean. Floors mopped, fresh flowers on the table, the whole house smelling like the lemon polish my mother loved. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with a book and maybe a movie. I had just settled onto the couch with a cup of tea when I heard the familiar sound of multiple cars pulling up. Marcus walked in first, followed by Tyler, carrying a case of beer, Jamal with pizzas, and Chris trailing behind with bags of chips. "Babe, the game's on," Marcus announced casually, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Tyler's TV is broken, so we're watching here." He didn't ask. He simply informed me. For the next 5 hours, my peaceful living room became a battlefield of shouting, laughter, and constant movement. I retreated upstairs to my studio, but even with the door closed and headphones on, the noise seeped through. When I finally came down after they had left, the scene was heartbreaking. Grease stains on my coffee table, empty bottles everywhere, a dark soda spill soaking into the rug I had bought after landing a big client. Marcus came home much later that night, smelling like beer and cigarette smoke. I was still cleaning. I tried again, keeping my voice soft and reasonable. Marcus, I really need us to find a better balance. This is my home. I can't keep being the one who cleans up after everyone. He looked at me with that blank expression. I was starting to know too well, then let out a short laugh. Alina, come on. They're just guys. It's a little mess. You're making it a bigger deal than it is. A little mess. That's what he called the growing resentment I felt every time I walked into my own space. That's what he called the loneliness that settled in my chest even when he was physically in the house. We would go to bed together, but the emotional distance between us felt wider than ever. There were other moments too. Like the time I had an important deadline and asked if they could keep it down just for one night. Tyler made a joke about me being the warden. And Marcus laughed along. Or the morning I found my favorite mug. The one my mother gave me. Chipped, because someone had used it for mixing protein shakes. I started noticing how Marcus behaved differently around them. With his friends, he was loud, carefree, the center of attention. With me, he became dismissive, as if my needs were inconveniences to his lifestyle. He enjoyed the stability I provided, the clean house, the stocked fridge, the reliable Wi-Fi, but offered very little emotional reciprocity in return. I kept hoping things would improve. I suggested couples activities, tried planning date nights, even invited his friends over for a more civilized dinner once. But nothing changed. The crew remained a constant presence, and Marcus continued treating my boundaries like suggestions rather than requirements. By the time that Thursday evening arrived, I was exhausted. Not just physically from long work hours, but emotionally drained from constantly defending my right to peace in my own home. I had been carrying the weight of the relationship almost entirely by myself, while Marcus floated through life with zero accountability. That's why, when he made that comment in the kitchen, surrounded by his laughing friends, something fundamental shifted inside me. It wasn't just about that one moment. It was about every single time I had been made to feel like a guest in my own life. I realized in that quiet, zen-like clarity that I had been waiting for him to see me, to value me, to respect the space I had worked so hard to create. But he had already shown me, in 1,000 small ways, that he never would. And for the first time, I decided to believe him. If you've ever stayed in a relationship where you were the only one putting in real effort, if you've ever paid the price for someone else's comfort, while receiving very little in return, know that you're not alone. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is stop pretending. The real change was about to begin. The smell of garlic and fresh basil filled my kitchen as I stirred the sauce slowly, letting the rhythm of the wooden spoon calm my racing thoughts. It had been a long, stressful week with tight deadlines, and all I wanted was a peaceful weekend to recharge. Cooking my mother's recipes had always been my way of finding center. But that evening, peace was the last thing I would get. Marcus walked in already dressed to go out, phone pressed to his ear, laughing loudly at something one of the guys had said. His energy filled the small space immediately. "Oh yeah, I'm definitely in," he said into the phone, his voice booming. "A guy's weekend at the cabin is exactly what I need right now." There was a pause, then he added casually, "Nah, she's not coming. Don't even go there." He hung up and turned to me with a bright, excited grin, as if he had just won the lottery. "Good news, babe. The crew and I are heading up to the lake cabin tomorrow morning for the whole weekend." This was the first I was hearing about any plans. No discussion. No, what do you think? Just a casual announcement, like my opinion was an afterthought. I kept stirring, trying to maintain an even tone. "Which cabin are you guys going to?" Marcus looked at me like I had asked something completely outrageous. He let out a short, sharp laugh just as Tyler walked through the back door without knocking. Something that had become far too normal in my home. "Can you believe her?" Marcus said to Tyler, rolling his eyes dramatically. "She wants to know where I'm going." Tyler scoffed, looking me up and down. "Wow, she's really playing the wife card hard tonight." The heat rose in my cheeks, but I stayed silent. Jamal and Chris had appeared in the doorway behind Tyler now. All three of them standing in my kitchen, in the house I paid for, laughing at me. Marcus put his hands on his hips, his voice dripping with condescension as he delivered the line that would change everything. "Alina, stop acting like we're married. You don't get a say in where I go or who I'm with." The kitchen filled with their laughter. It wasn't just chuckles. It was full, mocking laughter. A symphony of derision directed at me in my own home, while the sauce my mother taught me to make continued bubbling on the stove. I stood there holding the wooden spoon, watching a single drop of red sauce fall onto the clean floor. In that moment, something profound happened inside me. The version of Elena, who had been fighting to make this relationship work, who had made excuses, who had cleaned up messes both literal and emotional, who had shrunk herself to keep the peace. That version simply stepped back. She didn't get angry, she didn't argue or cry, she just retired, quietly, peacefully, completely. I looked at Marcus's smug face, the man I once thought I loved, and I smiled, a big, calm, genuine-looking smile that seemed to confuse even him. "You know what?" I said, my voice cheerful and light. "You're 100% right. My mistake." Their laughter grew louder. They thought I was backing down, being the cool girlfriend who finally understood her place. Marcus even walked over and gave me a condescending pat on the cheek before they all swept out of the house, heading off to their pre-weekend drinks, leaving me standing alone in the sudden silence. I turned off the burner. I wasn't hungry anymore. I walked slowly through the house. My house. I saw his jacket thrown carelessly over a chair, his video game controllers scattered across the coffee table, his shoes kicked off by the door. And instead of the usual wave of resentment, I felt something else. Clarity. Crystal clear, peaceful clarity. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Not married, no say. Got it." A new plan began forming in my mind that night, not out of anger but out of self-respect. A quiet, methodical plan to take back my space, my peace, and my life. I went to bed early and slept more deeply than I had in months. The decision had been made, and the weight I had been carrying, without realizing it, finally lifted. The next morning, I watched from the window as Marcus's truck pulled away, packed with the crew, laughing and blasting music. As soon as they disappeared down the street, I picked up my phone and made the first call. If you've ever reached that breaking point, where you finally stop hoping and start acting, you know exactly how freeing that moment feels. This was mine. The moment Marcus's truck disappeared down the street, a quiet determination settled over me. There was no rage, no dramatic music playing in my head, just a calm, focused energy I hadn't felt in a very long time. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and I was going to do it with dignity and intelligence. My first stop was next door. Mrs. Evelyn had become more than just a neighbor over the years. She was a retired theater director in her late 70s, sharp as a tack, with a wicked sense of humor and a deep understanding of human nature. We had spent many evenings on her porch talking about life, loss, and the importance of self-respect. She had lost her husband of 50 years and often told me stories about maintaining one's dignity through difficult times. I brought her a plate of fresh-baked lavender cookies and sat with her on the porch swing. After we exchanged pleasantries about the weather and her garden, I told her everything. I didn't embellish. I simply shared what Marcus had said and how it made me feel. Mrs. Evelyn listened carefully, her eyes lighting up with that familiar theatrical spark. When I finished, she patted my hand firmly. "Oh, my dear Elena, that young man has been taking advantage of your kindness for far too long. You leave the dramatic reveal to me. I've been waiting for a role like this." We spent the next 20 minutes crafting her lines. She took notes on a little pad like she was preparing for opening night. Her enthusiasm was contagious, and by the time I left her house, I had my first true ally in this quiet mission. Back in my own home, I began what I privately called Operation Reclaim. I didn't rush. I moved with purpose. First, I called a reputable moving company and scheduled a pickup for the next morning. Then I went room by room, carefully boxing Marcus's belongings. I didn't do it angrily. I did it methodically. His gaming console and collection of games went into one box. His expensive sneakers and clothes into others. I even labeled them with a quiet honesty that felt strangely satisfying. Items that were free to him but costly to me. Gaming equipment and avoidance tools. Clothes he could afford while contributing nothing to the home. I changed the locks on all the doors that afternoon. I changed the Wi-Fi password to something private and meaningful. I paid for a month of storage in advance. A final, non-obligatory gesture. As I worked, I allowed myself to feel the emotions that came up. There was sadness for the relationship I had hoped for. There was grief for the time I had lost trying to make it work. But mostly there was relief, deep, profound relief at finally choosing myself. That evening, I sat on my couch, still surrounded by some of his things, and made a list of everything I wanted to bring back into my space. Colors that made me happy. Furniture that felt warm and inviting. Plants. Art. Things that reflected who I really was, not who I had been trying to be for Marcus. Before going to bed, I stood in the middle of the living room and spoke softly to the empty house. "This is my home, my sanctuary. And starting tomorrow, it will feel like it again." The next 2 days were a whirlwind of quiet transformation. The movers arrived right on time and handled everything professionally. As I watched the truck pull away with all of Marcus's physical presence, I felt lighter than I had in months. The house was no longer carrying the weight of his constant chaos. I spent hours cleaning every corner, not out of resentment, but out of love for my space. I opened all the windows and let fresh air move through the rooms. I played my favorite music. For the first time in a long time, the house started smelling like peace again. Mrs. Evelyn checked in on me both days, bringing me tea and encouragement. Her support meant more than she probably realized. By Sunday afternoon, the physical evidence of Marcus's presence was gone. The house was a blank canvas, and I was ready to paint it with my own colors, my own energy, and my own future. The final and most important piece of my plan would happen later that day. Something that would fill the house with a different kind of presence. A loyal, loving, uncomplicated presence. But that's a story for the next chapter. With the house finally empty of Marcus's belongings, I felt a surge of creative energy I hadn't experienced in nearly a year. This wasn't just cleaning or moving furniture. This was a full resurrection of my space and, in many ways, of myself. I started in the living room. The cold, gray sectional sofa that Marcus had chosen went up for sale online and was gone within hours. In its place, I brought in a beautiful, oversized cream linen sofa that invited long afternoons of reading and relaxation. I replaced the minimalist metal coffee table with a warm reclaimed wood piece I found at a local artisan market. It had character, history in its grain, and it felt like it belonged in a real home. The walls were next. I took down the dark, impersonal posters Marcus had hung and replaced them with soft watercolor paintings and photographs I had taken myself over the years. I painted one accent wall a gentle sage green. a color that brought the feeling of calm nature indoors. Sunlight streamed through the windows differently now, warmer and more welcoming. In the kitchen, I rearranged everything to suit only me. I brought out my mother's old cookbooks and displayed them proudly. I hung new curtains that let in light but maintained privacy. Every small change felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that had been buried under someone else's preferences. The bedroom underwent the most emotional transformation. I replaced the heavy blackout curtains with light, airy linen ones that welcomed the morning sun. The geometric metal art above the bed that Marcus loved was replaced with a large, beautiful macrame wall hanging I had admired for months. New bedding in soft botanical patterns, plush pillows, and a thick, cozy rug completed the space. For the first time in months, I looked forward to sleeping in my own bed. I worked steadily through Saturday and into Sunday, taking breaks to sit quietly and absorb the changes. With every box I unpacked and every new item I placed, I could feel the energy of the house shifting. It no longer felt like a shared compromise. It felt like mine again. But the most meaningful part of the transformation wasn't the furniture or the paint. It was the intention behind it. I wasn't doing this to hurt Marcus. I was doing it to heal myself, to honor the woman my mother raised. Independent, creative, deserving of peace. As I worked, memories came and went, but I didn't dwell on them. I acknowledged the sadness, then let it pass. I focused instead on gratitude for the clarity I had received. Marcus's words, as painful as they were in the moment, had been a gift. They gave me permission to stop pretending and start living authentically in my own home. By late Sunday afternoon, the house was transformed. It was warm, colorful, and deeply personal. Fresh flowers sat on the new coffee table. Soft lighting glowed in the corners. The air smelled like lemon polish, fresh linen, and possibility. I stood in the middle of the living room and took a deep breath. For the first time in a very long time, I felt completely at home. There was just one more thing I wanted. Something I had been dreaming about for years but had put off because Marcus claimed he was allergic. I drove to the local animal rescue with an open heart, telling myself I was only going to look. But the moment I saw her, I knew. Luna was a beautiful golden retriever, with the gentlest eyes and the softest fur. She was 2 years old, surrendered when her previous family could no longer care for her. When they let her into the visiting yard, she walked straight up to me, leaned her entire body against my legs, and looked up as if to say, "I've been waiting for you." I brought her home that same afternoon. Watching Luna explore every room with curious joy, her tail wagging constantly, filled the house with a new kind of warmth. She claimed the new sofa immediately, circling 3 times before settling down with a contented sigh. As I sat beside her, stroking her soft ears, I felt the final piece of my healing click into place. The house was no longer just mine. It was ours, mine and Luna's, a true sanctuary. The stage was now perfectly set for Marcus's return. And I was ready. With the house feeling wonderfully light and open after the transformation, I realized there was still one kind of emptiness I wanted to fill. Not with another person, but with a presence that offered unconditional love and loyalty. I had always wanted a dog, but Marcus had repeatedly said he was allergic. Looking back, I suspect it was more about control than actual allergies. That Sunday afternoon, with my home finally feeling like mine again, I decided it was time. The local animal rescue was quiet when I arrived. I walked slowly past the kennels, my heart aching for every dog that looked back at me with hopeful eyes. Then, at the very end of the row, I saw her. Luna was a gorgeous golden retriever with the kindest, softest expression I had ever seen. Her information card said she was 2 years old and had been surrendered when her family moved to an apartment that didn't allow large dogs. She didn't bark or jump. She simply sat there, tail thumping gently against the floor, looking at me with quiet understanding. When the staff let her into the small visiting yard, Luna walked straight to me, leaned her warm body against my legs, and let out a soft, contented sigh. In that moment, I knew she was coming home with me. The drive back was filled with quiet joy. Luna sat in the back seat, occasionally poking her head between the seats to check on me. When we pulled into the driveway, she explored the house with calm confidence, sniffing every corner as if she were learning the layout of her new kingdom. Then she walked into the living room, hopped onto the new cream sofa, circled 3 times, and settled down with a deep, satisfied groan. Watching her claim the space so naturally brought tears to my eyes. This was what home was supposed to feel like. The rest of the afternoon was pure healing. I played gentle fetch with Luna in the backyard. We sat together on the porch while I drank tea, and she chewed happily on a new toy. I changed the Wi-Fi name to something private and meaningful. The password reflected my new reality. As evening approached, I cooked a simple, beautiful meal for myself. Something Marcus would never have appreciated. Luna stayed close by, her presence a constant, comforting reminder that I was no longer alone in this house. I spent that evening curled up on the sofa with Luna's head resting in my lap, her soft breathing filling the quiet space. The house felt alive again, warm, peaceful, complete. For the first time in years, I felt truly at home in my own life. Sunday night came softly. I had made myself a lovely dinner and was settled on the sofa with Luna when my phone buzzed with a notification from the video doorbell. Marcus was home. I watched calmly as he approached the front door, looking relaxed and tanned from his weekend away. He tried his key, it didn't turn. He tried again, then started knocking. From the sofa, Luna lifted her head, let out one deep, calm woof, and then settled back down. She wasn't threatened. She was simply announcing her presence. My phone started ringing. I let it go to voicemail, then another call, and another. I remained completely still, breathing deeply, Luna's warmth against me. This was the moment I had prepared for. And I was ready. The doorbell camera showed Marcus pacing on the porch, growing more frustrated with each failed attempt to open the door. His knocking turned to banging. My phone continued lighting up with calls I calmly declined. Then, right on cue, Mrs. Evelyn's porch light flickered on. She stepped outside in her housecoat, holding a watering can even though it was dark. "Oh, Marcus, dear. Is that you?" she called out in her perfectly dramatic, neighborly voice. Marcus rushed over, clearly relieved to see a familiar face. "Mrs. Evelyn, thank God. My key isn't working. Is Elena home? I can see the lights on." Mrs. Evelyn took a long, theatrical pause before delivering her lines with absolute perfection. "Elena is home, yes. She's had the most wonderful weekend. A real transformation, she told me. She said you two aren't married, so she decided to stop acting like you were. She redecorated the entire house. It's so vibrant and warm now. And the best part? She got the most beautiful dog named Luna, a loyal companion who doesn't talk back." I watched through the camera as the realization hit Marcus. He pressed his face against the front window and saw the completely transformed living room, and Luna's golden head resting peacefully in my lap. The sound he made was somewhere between a shout and a sob. My phone exploded with furious texts. After letting him stew for several minutes, I sent one calm, clear message. "You were right. We're not married. I don't get a say in your life, and you no longer get a say in mine. Your belongings are in storage. The address and code are in your email. You have 30 days. I wish you well." Then I blocked him everywhere. The next few weeks brought the expected noise. His friends tried painting me as the villain on social media. I responded with a simple before and after carousel post showing the cold, gray house versus the warm, beautiful space I had created, with Luna looking majestic in the middle. The caption was quiet but powerful. Listened to what he said and finally agreed. Best decision I've ever made. The truth spread naturally through our circles. People saw the full picture. Marcus tried the legal route. His lawyer sent a letter demanding access and compensation. My lawyer responded with documentation of 8 months of bills I had paid alone, along with a polite invoice for his share of living expenses. We never heard from them again. Months later, I ran into Jamal at the dog park. He looked awkward but sincere. I just wanted to say we were out of line that night. Marcus is still struggling. He blames you for everything. I smiled, watching Luna chase a ball with pure joy. I didn't ruin his life, Jamal. I simply stopped participating in my own erasure. And I've never been happier. He nodded, looking at how peaceful I was. You look good, Elena. Really good. I am doing more than good. I'm thriving. The house is now a true sanctuary. Luna is the best roommate I've ever had. Loyal, funny, and always happy to see me. I work in my sunroom with the windows open, create beautiful photography, and enjoy quiet evenings filled with peace. The greatest lesson I learned from all of this is simple but profound. Sometimes the best thing you can do is listen carefully to what people tell you, not with their words, but with their actions, and believe them. Marcus showed me exactly who he was and what our relationship meant to him. When he said I didn't get a say, I finally agreed. And in doing so, I gave myself the freedom to create a life where I do have a say in every single thing that matters. If you're watching this and you're in a situation where you feel unseen, undervalued, or erased in your own home or relationship, please hear me. You deserve peace. You deserve respect. You deserve a space that feels like home. Sometimes reclaiming that space starts with one quiet decision to stop shrinking and start choosing yourself. Thank you for sitting with me through this entire story. If it resonated with you, drop a heart in the comments and type mine if you're choosing your peace today. Your support means the world to me. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, protect your peace, trust your worth, and never be afraid to take your space back. Calmly, powerfully, and completely.